basic rule of medical science is that no human life should be used for the benefit of another. Some people are against human cloning and related techniques for this reason. In cloning, an egg cell is used to develop ordinary cells. The opponents of cloning insist that this is killing, because it destroys the potential of the egg to develop into a human being. Other people oppose cloning because at this stage it is unreliable. In animal experiments, for example, success rates are very low. Still, others are concerned about the future that cloning might bring about. They are afraid that cloning will lead to the production of human beings for body parts. They also fear that cloning might lead to attempts to create superior humans. Not everyone is against human cloning. However, some people support cloning if it is for the purpose of medical treatment, although they oppose the cloning of babies. The medical benefits of cloning and related techniques, they argue, could be huge. For example, if a heart can be developed from a patient's own cell, the body will not reject it. Furthermore, he or she will not have to wait for someone to die to get a new heart. Supporters claim that the use of such technique is not killing. Just as ordinary store-bought eggs do not develop into chickens, the eggs used for cloning do not develop into human beings by themselves. They also argue that it is already practically impossible to stop a patient from receiving medical treatment that in some way depends on cloning and related techniques. Even if one country bans cloning, there will always be another country that promotes it. The supporters therefore maintain that scientists should have the freedom to experiment and that people should have the freedom to seek life-saving treatments. In other words, they feel that cloning should be continued unless it is clearly shown to be harmful. The debate over this issue is likely to go on for some time. Why is it that many people who have suffered a major shock, such as divorce or the death of a family member, seem to be weaker against a variety of major and terminal illnesses? One common idea among psychologists has been that people could deal with suffering more effectively if they were able to understand and accept it. Indeed, many experts emphasize the value of expressing thoughts and feelings associated with upsetting events. Recently, a team of medical researchers investigated the links between describing psychologically painful events and long-term health. In one experiment, healthy college students were asked to write about either personally disturbing experiences or ordinary topics over a period of 4 days. In the month afterwards, students who had chosen to reveal their inner thoughts and feelings in their writing visited the health center for illness much less often than those who had written about everyday topics. In an experiment that followed, another group of healthy students were given the 4-day writing exercise. Some chose to write about highly personal and upsetting experiences, including loneliness, problems with family and friends, and death. When questioned immediately afterwards, they stated that they did not feel any better. However, their blood samples taken before and after the experiment showed evidence of an improved resistance to illness. The white cells that fight off bacteria and viruses had increased their reaction and sensitivity to these invaders. This trend continued over the following 6 weeks, when another blood sample was taken. Individuals who showed the best results were those who wrote about topics that they had actively refrained from telling others about. The researchers proposed that failure to face up to painful experience can be a form of stress itself and can increase the possibility of illness. It follows then that actively dealing with a major shock makes possible its understanding and acceptance. Actively dealing makes the answer is not to suffer in silence. It may not always be possible to talk about personal problems, but writing them down will help the body to fight disease in the long run. When it comes to eating, the United States has a lesson to learn from France. I'm not talking about the kind of elaborate dinners Americans often associate with the French. Many of the meals the French eat are quick and simple. The difference is that the French eat together. They have managed to preserve a tradition that is good for everyone's health, for the family meal. According to the French government's Committee for Health and Education, 75% of the French eat dinner together as a family, and many French school children still go home for lunch. These figures haven't changed much in decades. In the United States, on the other hand, national studies show that on average, only one family in three sits down for dinner together on a daily basis. Over the last 2 decades, there has been a steady decline in the number of American families that eat together regularly. It looks like the family meal is disappearing. How and why did the family meal start to disappear in the United States? My friends in the United States have various explanations why meals together aren't an option for their families. Parents and children lead hectic lives, and there just isn't time for a sit-down meal. Kids' sports schedules run on into dinner hour. After a long day at work, parents are too tired to cook. Teenagers are off on their own after school. Everyone likes different foods, they say. So what is the point of eating together? Yet study after study shows that having meals together as a family is good for both adults and children. A University of Michigan study found that mealtime at home was the single strongest factor predicting better achievement scores and fewer behavioral problems for children. Mealtime was far more powerful than time spent in school, studying, worshiping, playing sports, or doing arts activities. Other studies show that children like family meals. In one report, nearly 4/5 of adolescents cited eating dinner at home as one of their top-rated family activities. In a national YMCA poll in 2000, when teenagers were asked about their worries, 21% rated not having enough time with parents as their top concern. There is probably no nation where the citizens do not have at least some dissatisfaction with their society. There may be some nations where dissatisfaction does not come to the surface, but those nations cannot be called democracies. The World Youth Survey asks whether young people are satisfied with their own society and inquires about their awareness of social issues. The question asked was, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with your country? Respondents were asked choose from the following: satisfied, somewhat satisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, or don't know. Some 35.7% of American youth replied that they were satisfied with their society. This ratio was markedly higher than that of other nations. America and Sweden were the only two nations where the combined responses of satisfied and somewhat satisfied were in the majority. In those two countries, the percentage were slightly over 75%. 3 out of 4 young people in both nations were in one way or another satisfied. The responses among young people in Japan and Korea were quite similar to one another. Those who were satisfied accounted for 4.2% in Japan and 6.3% in Korea. Those who were somewhat satisfied came to 34.5% and 39.2% respectively. The country with the largest number of dissatisfied respondents was Germany. Close to 30% of young people there shared this opinion. Combined with the somewhat dissatisfied group, they accounted for more than 65%. The survey also asked what problems their country faces. The top answer among Japanese and German youth was it is difficult to find a job and many people are unemployed. The top answer in the US and Sweden was people are discriminated against by race. The top answer in Korea was there are gaps in income and occupation among people with different educational backgrounds. The responses of these young people would seem to accurately reflect the issues that those nations are confronting. A society in which everyone can live happily may be called a utopia. However, a utopia is no more than an ideal society within the imagination. Furthermore, the Greek root of the word means nowhere, a place that does not exist. And yet, the possession of a sensibility that can imagine a world where everyone is happy is a special privilege of young people alone. Beware of those who deliberately use aspects of the truth to deceive you and others. When someone tells you something that is true but intentionally leaves out important information that should be included for full comprehension on your part to take place, they can create a false impression. For example, an acquaintance might tell you, I just won $100 in the state lottery and it was fantastic when I took that $1 ticket back to the store and turned it in for 100 bucks. This woman's a winner, right? Maybe not. In fact, you later learn that she had purchased not one ticket but instead 200 for this specific lottery, and only one of these a winner. Eventually, you realize this woman who you thought was lucky or fortunate is in fact a huge loser. Although she didn't say anything false, she clearly left out important information and likely did so on purpose. That's called a half-truth, which is not technically a lie, but it's just as dishonest. Untrustworthy candidates in political campaign often use such deceptive communication strategies to trick voters into supporting them. Let's say that during Governor Smith's last term, her state lost 1 million jobs but gained 3 million new ones. Then she seeks another term in office and enters the election race. One of her opponents in that race subsequently begins a multimedia advertising campaign, saying, during Governor Smith's term, the state lost 1 million jobs. That is indeed true, but at the same time is intentionally deceptive. A more honest statement from her opponent would have been, During Governor Smith's term, the state had a net gain of 2 million jobs. Advertisers sometimes use half-truth as well, because it's illegal in many countries to openly make false claims about a product or service. Some advertisers try to mislead you with the truth. An ad might consequently boast, 9 out of 10 doctors recommend yucky pills to cure nose pimples. This is also a factual statement, but one which deliberately fails to mention that only 10 doctors were asked about yucky pills and 9 of these actually work for the Yucky Corporation. No one knows better than your mother, right? But does she know how much underwear you own? Jackie International does. Or the number of ice cubes you put in a glass? Coca-Cola knows that we put 3.2 ice cubes in a glass and prefer cans to pop out of vending machines at a temperature of 2 degrees. Which potato chips do you usually eat first, the broken ones or the whole ones? Try asking a big snack maker. Big companies know. The what, where, how, and when of their consumers' wants and demands. They figure out all sorts of things about us that we don't even know ourselves. Most companies research us in detail and collect mountains of facts about our buying habits and preferences. Did you know that 51% of all males pull their left pants leg on first, whereas 65% of women start with the right leg? Nothing about our behavior is sacred. A study showed that 68% of consumers prefer their toilet paper to unwind over the spool rather than under. But Americans are not always easy to figure out. A few years ago, Campbell Soup gave up trying to learn our opinions about the ideal sized meatball after a series of tests showed that we prefer one so big it wouldn't fit in the can. In fact, almost everything we swallow is closely monitored by someone. Each year we consume 156 hamburgers, 95 hot dogs, 283 eggs, 5 pounds of yogurt, 9 pounds of cereal, and 2 pounds of peanut butter. We spend 90 minutes a day munching it. Of all businesses, however, the prize for research thoroughness may go to toothpaste makers. Among other things, they know that our favorite toothbrush color is blue and that only 37% of us are using one that's more than 6 months old. About 47% of us put water on our brush before we apply the paste. 15% put water on after the paste. 24% do both. And 14% don't wet the brush at all. Thus, most big companies have answers to all the what, where, when, and how questions about their consumer demand. But to affect demand, companies need the answer to one more question. They need to know what causes us to want the things we buy. That's a much harder question to answer. As a young boy, I was always aware that what people said was not always what they really meant or felt. I also knew that it was possible to get others to do what I wanted if I read their real feelings and responded appropriately to their needs. At the age of 11, I began my sales career by selling rubber sponges from door to door after school to make pocket money. I quickly figured out how to tell if someone was likely to buy from me or not. When I knocked on a door, if someone told me to go away but their hands were open and they their paths, I knew it was safe to keep trying. No matter how negative they may have sounded, their open hands showed me that they weren't aggressive. On the other hand, if someone told me to go away in a soft voice but used a pointed finger or closed hand, I knew it was time to leave. As a teenager, I became a magazine salesperson selling at night. My ability to read people's body language earned me enough money to buy my first house. I joined the life insurance business at the age of 20 and went on to break several sales records at my company. I became the youngest person to sell over $1 million worth of business in my first year. It turned out that the techniques I had learned as a boy in reading body language through my experience in selling sponges and magazines were directly related to the success I could have in any situation involving people. Most researchers now agree that words are used mainly for giving information, while body language is used for communicating attitudes and feelings. In some cases, however, body language can be used as a substitute for verbal messages. Reading body language is a skill that can be learned, because in any culture, words and body movements occur together in highly predictable patterns. Thus, a well-trained person can tell what movement someone is making simply by listening to what he or she is saying. A person who is trained to read body language can also guess which country someone is from just by watching his or her gestures. Touching is the language of physical intimacy. Because of this, touch can be the most powerful of all the communication channels. In May 1985, Bridget Gurney was trapped for 6 hours beneath a collapsed construction crane in New York City. Throughout her ordeal, she held the hand of a rescue worker who stayed by her side as heavy machinery removed the tons of twisted steel from her crushed legs. A stranger's touch gave her hope and the will to live. Touch appears to affect the sexes differently. Women sometimes react much more favorably to touch than men. In an interesting study, psychologists asked a group of nurses to lightly touch a patient once or twice shortly before the patient underwent surgery. The touching produced strongly positive reaction, but only among women. It appeared to lower their blood pressure and anxiety levels both before and after surgery. For men, however, the touching proved to be very upsetting. Their blood pressure and anxiety levels both rose. The psychologists suspect that because men are taught to be more stoic, that is to hide their feelings and to ignore their fears, the touching rattled them by reminding them that life is fragile. How do you feel about touching and being touched? Salespeople think they know. Research shows that it is harder to say no to someone who touches you when making a request. But not everyone is happy about being touched by a stranger. Think about your own comfort level when you find yourself in a crowd. Are you relaxed and loose, or does physical contact make you feel awkward and tense? In some situations, we can't help touching each other. Take a crowded elevator, for instance. Normally, people stand shoulder to shoulder and arm to arm, accepting such close contact without complaint. The rule seems to be touch only from shoulder to elbow, but nowhere else. Even though the Japanese are regarded as a non-touching society, Do crowded cities force them to be jumped into subways and trains? Edward T. Hall, an anthropologist, says the Japanese handle their uneasiness about being packed into public places by avoiding eye contact and drawing within themselves emotionally, thus touching without feeling. The impact of exposure to violent video games has not been studied as extensively as the impact of exposure to TV or movie violence. The research is right. However, on the whole, the results reported for video games until now are very similar to those obtained in the investigations of TV and movie violence. Among the effects of violent game playing are increases in physiological arousal and physically aggressive behavior, such as hitting, kicking, and pulling clothes or hair. Studies also have found a reduction in harmful behavior among youth exposed to violent video games. Males tend to prefer action-oriented video games involving shooting, fighting, sports, action, adventure, fantasy role-playing, and strategy according to the Michigan State Survey. Females prefer classic board games, trivia quizzes, and puzzles. Electronic game playing gets young people involved with technologies and opens up opportunities in high-paying tech careers, notes Communications Professor Bradley Greenberg of Michigan State. It is believed that these opportunities go to boys because they spend more time working with electronic games and computers, says Greenberg. If girls become more involved with technology at an early age, it is likely that the interest in technology will continue into the work world. If females do become more involved in technology fields, including game development, they may create less violent games that promote cooperation rather than aggression. Video games are in 80% of US homes with children. They generated $6 billion in 2000 and $11 billion by 2003. All indications are that the industry will continue to grow at a healthy rate, says Greenberg. The emerging market is for games designed more with girls in mind that engaged them for longer periods of time and force them to further investigate the technology behind the games. The next frontier involves transferring video game technology to educational settings and using the young people's fascination with the games to involve them more with innovative teaching technologies. Until that day comes, however, more awareness is needed of the impact of violent games on young people's behavior. Anderson and his colleagues conclude. Even with the hard work and caring of many dedicated teachers and concerned parents, the U.S. continues to have a reading problem, according to the National Center for Educational Information. 38% of fourth grade students cannot read and understand a short paragraph of the type found in a simple children's book. Results from a 1998 study show that 60% of U.S. teenagers could comprehend specific facts, but fewer than 5% could elaborate on the meaning of the material read. No wonder many parents are discouraged, but they needed to be. By doing simple things like reading to their child, sharing their thinking about what they read, and telling their child stories, they can help develop the foundation needed for children to become good readers and learn that reading is not a chore, but a lifetime adventure. Good readers follow a number of key strategies whether they are reading a magazine or a textbook. Firstly, they create a wide range of mental and visual images as they read. to feel involved with what they're reading. Then, they use their background and relevant prior knowledge before. They use their background and relevant prior knowledge before, during, and after reading to enhance their understanding of what they're reading. They also make and ask questions before, during, and after reading to clarify meaning, make predictions, and focus their attention on what's important. Good readers infer and determine the most important ideas or themes and distinguish between these and unimportant information. Next, they track their thinking while reading to get the overall meaning. Finally, if they have trouble understanding specific words, phrases, or longer passages, they use a wide range of problem-solving strategies, including skipping ahead, rereading, asking questions, using a dictionary, and reading the passage aloud to fix up their understanding. Reading is fundamental to success in life. It's that simple. Reading opens the door to virtually all other learning. You have to be able to read to learn mathematics, science, history, engineering, mechanics, political science, not to mention surf the web or figure out how to operate that new DVD player. Basically, you have to be able to read to succeed. People may decide to study foreign languages for various reasons. They may do so for the immediate purpose of satisfying the requirements of some public examination or of getting greater fun and enjoyment out of holiday abroad. Business people may have to deal directly or indirectly with various kinds of information from abroad. Research workers may realize the importance of being able to read the latest reports of advances made in their studies as soon as they are published in foreign journals, without waiting for a translator who may or may not have the ability to make an exact translation with 100% accuracy. People may be keenly interested in the activities of a foreign nation for political reasons. They may need information about current affairs that following newspapers and journals alone can deliver. Students of literature must surely be able to read great works firsthand. Learning a new language implies entering a new world, and it inevitably leads to a widening of intellectual experience. Learning a new language well enough to be able to understand it when heard, to speak it, read it, and write it is such hard training that we suddenly need some strong urge to drive us on. The four distinct and separable activities just mentioned, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, call for constant, preferably daily exercise. These activities are concerned in varying degrees with four aspects of language study: pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary, and idiom. It is useful to keep these four activities and four aspects clearly in mind. Learning a new language calls for no great originality of mind or critical talent, but it does demand an eager intellectual curiosity and a constant and lively interest in the endless ways in which human ideas may be expressed. It demands quick observation first of all, reasonable ability to mimic and imitate, good powers of association and generalization, and good memory.